All right. Well, good morning. Welcome to our morning devotions on this Monday, February 17th. And just good to see everybody. We're in Second Samuel chapter 5. I included the first five verses of Second Samuel 5 because these are very important verses. It speaks of David being anointed as the king over a united Israel. That's what the first passage is about. And that is central to the rest of the book, that he is now the king, not simply in Hebron, but that he's going to be king over all of Israel. That's in verses 1 through 5. The verses 6 through 10 is the taking of Jerusalem, which at that time was in the possession of the Jebusites, and some things that we can examine there. And verses 11 through 12, we hear of Hiram, who's up in Lebanon, and his support of David and the building of a place for David, his own home, the palace. 13 through 16, verses 13 through 16, talk about David's concubines, more wives and concubines that he takes. In verses 17 through 21, you have the first defeat of the Philistine army at Baal Perazim, and there's interesting material there. And in verses 20 through to 25, you have the defeat of the Philistine army at Rephaim. And so that's how the chapter ends. A couple defeats of the Philistine army. After they find out that he's the king, they come out to test him. But as they come, and each time he asks God what to do, God says, go after it, gives him clear instructions. The second one, the battle at Rephaim, is the story about the wind blowing in the tops of the mulberry trees and how they sneak in behind the Philistines and win a great victory there. So it's 25 verses. That's a rough outline of it. There are some words here and some truths that I think that I can develop for you, at least give you some idea what it's talking about as we look through this chapter. So we're looking at 2 Samuel 5. The first five verses that he comes and he's installed as the united king over Israel. It says, then came all the tribes of Israel to David unto Hebron, because that's where he is serving, and spake, saying, behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. He says, we're just all Israelis. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, thou wast he that led us out and brought us in Israel. That is, even when Saul was here, everybody was counting on you, David. That's what that says. You are still leading through different means. But even when King Saul was here, you were the one that was bringing in and taking out, which is just to say that you were in control of the circumstances. Thou shalt feed my people, and the Lord said to thee, thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel. So you're going to care for them, and you're going to lead them militarily, is essentially what this is saying. You're going to be the king, but you're also going to be a captain, because what David does is he is a warrior. Now, we've spoken of this before. He's the king, but he is a fighter. He's going to take on the Philistines and everybody else that comes up against Israel. Verse 3, so all the elders of Israel came to the king to Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed king over Israel. And there it is. It's a united kingdom. They've anointed king. They've David king. They recognize that. And then it tells us this. It gives us a little timeline here in verse 4. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. So altogether, it's 30 years when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. All right, so there's, I say 8. I probably should just be more precise. It says 7 and 6. And in Jerusalem, he served 33 years. So there's your 40, and over all Israel and Judah. So for the first 7.5 years, he's reigning from Hebron, and then in Jerusalem for 33 years. So it's a little more if you look at it. So it's 33 and 7 would have been 40, and then 6 months, but it's rounded off. And 3 years over all Israel and Judah. So there is the accounting of the reign of David. The next thing is he's coming to Jerusalem, and there's some interesting words here that, I had to look up as you read this. It says, and the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land. That is, the Jebusites at that time occupied the city, the walled fortress of Jerusalem. And the Jebusites are so sure that it can't be conquered, they there's trash talking here between the Jebusites and David in regards to the lame and the blind. It says, this is what the Jebusites say to David. He says, the inhabitants of the land which spake unto David, saying, except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither, thinking David cannot come in hither. That is, we're just going to send down the blind and the lame, because our city is so formidable and it is a fortress that can't be taken, that we're not going to actually send our army. We're just going to send the blind and the lame to you, and they alone will defeat you, David. That's the case. Well, David takes this up as the Jebusites introduce the lime and the lame as defeaters of David's army, because they're depending on the walls of Jerusalem. And that's what you're going to read here. David is going to now call all the Jebusites the blind and the lame, all right? And he's going to defeat the city, because this was their way of just getting under David's skin by saying, no, you can't take us. We're in Jerusalem. If we just send up the blind and the lame, they will defeat your army, because we're not afraid of you guys coming at all. Nevertheless, it says in verse 7, David took the stronghold of Zion. He did take Jerusalem. The same is the city of David, it's the city of David, which we have Bethlehem is where he's born, but Jerusalem is the city of David. And David said on that day, now he's talking to his soldiers now, whoso getteth up to the gutter and smiteth the Jebusites, the lame, and the blind. That is, he's not saying it's the Jebusites and then the blind and the lame people. He's saying the Jebusites, I'm calling them all blind and lame. Rather than call them Jebusites because they started this, he says, yeah, we're just going to say everybody behind the wall there. The Jebusites equal the blind and lame. And when he talks about the gutter, when you read the commentaries, there's all kinds of things about it. But I think what it is just, it deals with like a gutter that would be like at the top of the wall. That is, I think what he's trying to say here is anyone will scale the wall. You got to scale the wall and get over the wall to defeat the enemy. So anybody that will scale the wall. The other thing that I thought was interesting, and this gutter thing, it's just talking about whoever's going to be in the forefront of the battle. Some talk about it as a subterranean stream that would have enabled them to get under the wall. And so you have, I think those are, of all the things that I've read, I think those are probably the most interesting. Either one means you're going to be in the forefront of the battle. You're either going to be scaling the wall, or you're going to be sneaking under the wall. That is, you're going to be toe to toe with the Jebusites as we attack Jerusalem. If you're part of that group, he said, whosoever getteth up to the gutter and smiteth the Jebusites and the lame and the blind, all right, he said, that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Wherefore they said, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. That is, when it went, after this is all done, that the Jebusites were excluded from Jerusalem. They were excluded from everything because of what happened here, because they had to go kill them to take over the city. So rather than calling them Jebusites, he's calling them the blind and the lame. That was David's opinion of these guys. So David dwelt in the fort and called it the city of David. And then it tells us in the last part of verse 9, and David built round about from Milo and inward. Milo, again, is one of these things. It's an archaeological thing, but most guys consider this as just a large fortified building with towers. Some argue that it was kind of like the Maginot Line, which was just high walls, something that would defend Jerusalem from an attack. It was some kind of fortification, but I think when they talk about Milo, it was a fortress that he built, and other fortresses, okay? That is, he's building armaments, he's building buildings to protect Jerusalem around the city of Jerusalem. When it says he built roundabout from Milo and inward. And then it says in verse 10, and David went on and grew great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him. And the God of hosts is, when it says God of hosts, it's speaking of God as the head of an army. Now, we talk about the hosts of heaven, or the angels. But here, the God of war, I mean, the Messiah warrior we see in the person of Jesus Christ, is the one that is identifying with David here, the king of Israel now, of united Israel, and warrior. And then it says this, we're introduced to Hiram. And Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters, and masons, and they built David an house. That is, he's going to ally himself with David, which is a really good thing. We know later that Solomon is going to make the same case. He says, "You help my dad. I want you to help me with the building of the temple." He says, "Then Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters, and masons. They built David an house." And then verse 12 is fascinating. And David perceived, David understood in himself, after all that had happened to him, and he's only 30 years old. He's young, okay, when this all starts. When he's done, he's going to be 70, okay? It's going to be 40 years. But, I mean, the Lord's going to use him in a marvelous way, okay? He said, David perceived that the Lord had established him, that the reason he's here is that God had made him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people Israel's sake. That is, he has raised up his kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, by placing David there because he loves Israel, for the sake of Israel, for the protection of Israel, for the care of Israel, for the leadership of Israel. David is in place, and that this is a blessing of God upon not only David, placing him there, but a nation of Israel, as the nation and king are now united. David understands that this is the hand of God, the blessing of God on the nation of Israel, which is just it's a fabulous thing. Verses 13 through 16, that section, it just says, "And David took him more concubines and wives out of Jerusalem after he had come from Hebron, and there were yet sons and daughters born of David." And then we have a list, okay? So more wives, more concubines. This is what kings did during those days. All right, still doesn't approach what his son Solomon is going to do, but this is kings at this time had harems. I'm not going to get into all the issues of polygamy, but this is something that was just very common in these days, these ancient days in the ancient Near East. And then it says this, verse 17. Verse 17 to 25 is talking about two battles, because the Philistines realize now, they know who David is. They know that he's a formidable force, and they're going to test him right away. He's the king. It says, "But when the Philistines heard that they had anointed king over Israel, all the Philistines came up to seek David, and David heard of it, and he went down to the hold." He says he's going down to the fort. "And the Philistines came also and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. And David inquired of the Lord, saying," and here it is, before he's going to go, he's going to ask the Lord whether or not he should go to fight here, or whether or not God's just going to take care of it, or he's not sure what's going on, so he has to find out from God what to do. "And David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up to the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into mine hand? And the Lord said unto David, Go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into thy hand." So yeah, take them on, take the army up there, you're going to defeat them, all right? It says, "And David came to Baal Perazim," and there is the word. The word Baal Perazim means the master of the breaches. The master of the breaches. A breach is where you can break through. So we're talking about a place that's called the master or the commander of the breaches, or the place where you can break through. That's what the word means. It says, "And David came to Baal Perazim, or the master of the breaches, and David smote them there, and said, The Lord hath broken forth upon mine enemies before me." That is, the Lord broke forth. The Lord made a way to defeat the enemies. The Lord is the master of the breaches. It is Baal Perazim. And he says, "As the breach of waters." That is, we went through the army like we were just walking through water. This is the way God enabled us to win the victory, as we drove through the army of the Philistines and we defeated them. All right. Therefore, he called the name of the place Baal Perazim. That is, this is where God enabled us to win the victory. He uses the illustration of water, but it's like might just say it was like a knife through hot butter is the way that I defeated the Philistines, because God made a way for us. Okay, Baal Perazim. This is the way this battle is remembered, because God was on his side, and this is with relative ease that the Philistines were defeated by the Israeli army. All right, which is a real turnaround from what was happening at the end of 1 Samuel with constant defeat under the leadership of Saul. And then we have there's an interesting note here after the defeat of the Philistines there, and there they left their images, and David and his men burned them. That is, everybody brings their gods to the battlefield because they want to win the victory. So after he defeats them, everybody's God is still laying around. For all those that think that there's something some value in an idol. I mean, after you're dead, the idol is just going to lay there. If there's nobody there to pick it up, carry it, to feed it, or as like some of our Eastern the religions where they leave food just at the god. If the person isn't there to energize the God has no energy of his own, the little g God, because it's just a stick or a stone. So after this is all over, and the Pharisees, or not the Philistines, run, uh, and whoever's defeated in the camp is left, the battlefield is left. Everybody's god, the Philistine gods are laying around. So they piled up all the little g gods, all the little idols. David says, gather up all the little g idols. I don't know how big they were. Something that an army could transport, I suppose, right? Unless they had a movable temple or something, the Philistines. And they put them in a pile and they burned them all. And there you go. If a little g god doesn't have a person there to do something with, they're good for kindling. And that's what David does. He just burns all the little g gods. I mean, I wonder what the Philistines thought about that, saying that he burned our gods. There's a note right there. And then we have, in verse 22 through 25, the second battle which God assists them in. He assists them in all these battles. He fights the battles for them, but he gives them instructions. When I say assist, God does not come down on his own and just smite the enemy. It's actually a battle which God is in. He's helping. He's helping with the swinging of the sword. He's helping with the management of men, with the moving of troops, decisions that are being made. The flying of the arrows, all these things that we think are arbitrary. These things are all in the hand of God to come out with a certain inevitable end, because he said, yes, you're going to defeat the enemy. And however it was done and all the decisions that were made, it was inevitable after God said that was going to happen, that David was going to win. This is an inevitability. It's the same thing about the future with God. The future is inevitable. It's not variable. We are in the midst of decision making and the rigors of life, all right, and the uncertainty of life. But for God, the future, he uses all of our decision making and the questions we have and the answers we receive. He uses all of this to an inevitable, certain end. All right. We can't plan that way because we don't know the future that way, but God does. When he tells him you're going to win, you're going to win. But you're going to win, he said, it's not like just God came down like, what is it, when Hezekiah is there and the Assyrian general comes out and the death angel comes and kills, 186,000 soldiers in their sleep. That's different. That's God's direct intervention, right? That's not what's happening here. These men are at war, and in the battle, they win. That's the point. And then it says in verse 22, and the Philistines came up yet again and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. Same place. David called it Baal Perazim. It says, and when David inquired of the Lord, he said, so he's asking again, and this is what God tells him. He says, thou shalt fetch a compass, which is you're going to sneak around behind them. Move the army behind them. All right? You're gonna hit them from their weak point. He says, so take a way around. A compass would be to go around the back, is what we're doing here, behind them, and come upon them over against the mulberry trees. So you're going to be in, so to speak, an orchard. I mean, a mulberry tree. I mean, I wouldn't say that that's exactly a fruit, but you're in trees. You're in fruit trees. And then he tells them this. And let it be when thou hearest the sound of a going in the tops of the mulberry trees. That is, when you start hearing the wind blowing in the top of these mulberry trees. So all the army is behind the Philistines. They've sought a way around behind them. God says, when you hear the wind blowing in the top of those mulberry trees, he says, then thou shalt bestir thyself. Then you attack. So the sign is the wind is going to blow on the top of these mulberry trees, and then you know it's time to attack, David. Bestir thyself and come upon them over against the mulberry trees. And you come through the trees and come upon the Philistines. And let it be, when thou hearest the sound of a going in the tops of the mulberry trees, then thou shalt bestir thyself, for then shall the Lord go out before thee to smite the host of the Philistines. And David did so as the Lord commanded him, and smote the Philistines from Geba until thou come to Gezer. So there's another victory. All right. Couple of interesting events here. So that is that is chapter 5, essentially. This is David now on the throne. David now has the city of Jerusalem. He now has his own palace. He's building fortifications around the city. His harem is growing. He's already got this byword for the Jebusites who he had to defeat, as he calls them the blind and the lame. And then the chapter ends with a couple of battles. One is both against the Philistines. One he talks about the commander or the master of the breaches, which he's talking about God who enabled him just to defeat the Philistine army with ease. And then again, God assists them in this attack and defeats them and routs them. He smites the Philistines. And another wonderful defeat of the Philistines on the part of the Israeli army. All right, that is chapter 5. So, David's anointed king over the United Kingdom. That is the big thing. Now he is the king. All right, and the kingdom is united. The kingdom is going to be united under his son, too, and it's going to be fantastic. I mean, there's a lot of things to learn about Solomon, but it's going to be united under Solomon as well. It's not until you have Solomon's boy, Rehoboam, who makes a terrible decision, terrible. And then you have Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Jeroboam's going to be in the north, and Rehoboam's going to be in the south, in Judah. And then we're going to have a divided kingdom until the very end, until all of Israel is destroyed and taken into captivity by Assyria and Babylon. So here is like the heyday. Right here is going to be like the heyday of the history of Israel. It's right here. So, all right. Well, the Lord bless you. It's Monday. Sun's shining, but freezing cold out here. At least it's not snowing. All right. You have a great day and live for the Lord. And Lord willing, we will see everybody tomorrow. All right. Lord bless you. We'll see you. Bye.